Well, tonight we are hearing from the president of Northland College about the financial crisis the college is in and how it got here. As we reported, in an emergency ask, the college is trying to raise $12 million or be forced to close. President Chad Dayton says ever since he took office in January of 2023, his priority was to conduct a deep financial dive into the college's long-term outlook. He says the challenges facing the institution are not unique to Northland, including declining enrollment and the loss of endowment funds. The private college, which is tuition-based, has seen a 24% decrease in student enrollment since 2017. With a $20 million operating budget annually, for the past 6 to 7 years, the college has had to rely heavily on donor contributions and endowment funds, and those resources are no longer sustainable.
Why wasn't the college more transparent about the situation over the years? I would imagine the board had an idea of your financial situation, that it was getting more and more worse with those long-term projections. Why wait until a month out to do an appeal, to do an ask for $12 million?
We realized that we needed to first try to make an emergency financial appeal, which we announced on March 11th. Obviously, a very ambitious goal of $12 million. $2 million was to ensure the completion of this academic year, but also we felt it unethical to embark upon a next academic year without assuredness that we had the funding in hand or the sources identified. And so that was the impetus behind announcing the emergency financial appeal.
Dayton also says the time of the announcement was student-focused. He says it gave students the calendar time to decide should they need to find other educational institutions and transfer out to complete their academic studies. Now, the president did not allude to the college closing at the end of this academic year. Instead, he says they are continuing to fundraise and are reviewing all viable possibilities to restructure the college to keep it from closing down in the next 2 weeks.